And will you all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
And we'll do roll call.
Roll call. Commissioner Costa.
Here.
Gerard.
Here.
Commissioner Lazan.
Here.
Commissioner Reynolds.
Here.
And Chair Morris.
Here.
And just for clarification, Commissioner Reynolds is with us via.
Now we call for the approval of the minutes of the April 20th meeting. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
I so move.
I'll second.
Costa.
Aye.
Gerard.
Aye.
Lazan.
Aye.
Reynolds.
Aye.
Aye. And do we have any communications?
Thank you, Chair Morris. Yes, at our June council meeting, we presented a revised ordinance to the council. It was headed to go for second reading for fire and weed abatement. And at the last minute, we pulled that off the agenda and made some revisions to allow for the potential of using goats and sheep for weed abatement purposes, as long as their presence on property didn't exceed 60 days in a calendar year. We were trying to make sure it didn't fall under the animal keeping regulations in the zoning ordinance. But to list that as, an applicable means of doing weed abatement. So that was introduced, and then they'll vote on it in July. And it was perfect. It came right after a presentation from Butte Fire Safe Council about their goat grazing program. I'm sure you've probably noticed along the Skyway, those goats. And so the other part of that program was a presentation to the council asking for their approval for the town to enter into a memorandum of understanding with the Butte Fire Safe Council to act as the lead agency for the environmental document to do goat grazing and other fire mitigation efforts in town limits. They have some grant money, but they need to evaluate the environmental impacts, and they have a professional on contract to do that report. We would just be in charge of holding the hearings, circulating it at a state level, responding to any comments, and then doing the adoption at the end. So they gave staff the okay to move forward with working out that MOU, and Manager Phillips the okay to sign it when we get to that point. So we'll probably start seeing that activity in town too. Oh, so not at the last council meeting, but we had a special at the end of May, right? And it was about our solid waste contract. So if you haven't heard, NRWS has had to make the difficult decision that they cannot financially continue to maintain that contract. They sought out opportunities for other companies to buy them out and came to the town to ask for an assignment of the existing franchise, Waste Management. Waste Management presented some written requests about amendments they wanted to make to the franchise agreement, and instead of having just staff back and forth with them, we made some preliminary comments and just presented it to council as is so that we could find out exactly what it was council wanted to see as part of that assignment. And I think they were very clear about their expectation for many of these closed down services like the green waste yard, the buyback center, the e-waste, the household hazardous waste, that we need to find a way to reopen those. Maybe not in the same schedule we had before, understandably. Once a month, once a quarter, something. And look at alternative options for the green waste. They're very explicit in their direction back to Waste Management, so they can work on it at their end, resubmit something that is more in line with what the council wants to see for that assignment. So we haven't come to any kind of agreement on the resubmittal yet, but once that's in and we've had a chance to talk it out, look it over, then we'll schedule it for another council meeting, probably a special. Something like that really needs the time and expertise of just that subject matter. And that's all I've got.
Thank you. Do we have any public communication? Did we receive any?
Not receiving.
And seeing that we have no continued public hearing, we will move on to item 5A, public hearing to discuss the Moose Lodge modified use permit application. Susan, would you like
Yes.
to present?
Thank you, Chair Morris. Are we good to open it back up? Perfect. Excellent. So as mentioned, this is a use permit modification application for the Moose Lodge located at 5275 Skyway. So on the bottom left of your screens, right, that's the pre-fire Moose Lodge. So this application is a request from the applicant to rebuild the Moose Lodge facility approximately 2,000 square feet larger than what we have record for in our files and what the Butte County Assessor has record of in their files. Not that matching that up changes any of the permitting requirements, but it's one of the reasons that we're coming to a hearing tonight. And then also permit an existing RV park with full hookups. That was not part of the 1971 use permit that we have a copy of, nor was it part of the 1985 modification when they did a building addition. So we have the original building microfilm from 1973, and it shows the original footprint of the building was about 4,100 square feet. It was like 4,080. And then in 1985, we have a building permit to do an addition on the building of 3,368, and it was during that time period where they modified their use permit for that addition. There were other structures on the site, right? There was a shade structure, there was a storage structure, but we don't see those as the same kind of use as the lodge, right? It's the difference between like a house and a garage. So we know those structures were there, but their square footages don't count towards the lodge's use. So I want to talk a little bit of detail about the different proposed land uses in this project. So first is what the town defines as a club or lodge land use. That is proposed to be located on the south side of this property, which is just shy of 3 acres, and approximately the same area that it was before. So on your screens on the bottom left there, it's that larger building. The septic system will require an upgrade, both to meet the demands of this larger system, plus septic codes have changed since the original and the last edition. 66 parking spaces are required as part of the municipal code parking demands, and they're being shown on the site plan. Access to this property is actually pretty impressive for a commercial piece of property. They have 3 points of ingress and egress. One off of Jarman Lane, that's like the main kind of driveway that's just south of the 76 station. They also have an easement, a paved easement that, heads west to Schmally. Plus, they have the Vista Way easement on their property. The title report potentially contains an error in it because it doesn't talk about rights to the easement, but we've notified the title company to further research that. It doesn't make sense the way it's written, but it doesn't actually show rights, but they know it's being used, so they're looking into that and to correct the title report. Also, part of this project, civil improvement plans, right, that'll go through our town engineer, and that's going to be for the drainage on the top, along the top left portion of the property line and along kind of the south parking. When you zoom in on the electronic, you can see there's vegetative swells, so that's some of the drainage improvements, plus just erosion control, the grading, and the parking facilities. Those all fall under the purview of the town engineer. Fire code is going to be responsible about the interior fire sprinklers that will be in the building, making sure there's adequate access for the fire engines to all points around the exterior of the building, and then also making sure that, these 3 points of access are capable of supporting the fire apparatus, which an imposed load of 75,000 pounds is the minimum. And from staff visits out to the site, they all seem more than capable of providing that. Also, the water system improvement plans, right, those will get reviewed and approved through PID for the domestic water service. There was a note about that probably needing to be upgraded. So for design review, the Moose Lodge is located in the lower part of Skyway, which is in our gateway design area. So they have a very specific section of our design standards to comply with. And in the description of the gateway, it talks about it supports the first impression approach to aesthetics, right? This is what our visitors, anybody coming to town, these are some of the first facilities that they see. And I wanted to point out we had an opportunity to look at two different styles for the Moose Lodge. The town has a process called a preliminary development review. It's no fee to the applicant, but they can submit some preliminary design plans. We'll route it around to the different departments and agencies for some preliminary comments, kind of to help you make the decision of, are there any glaring red flags before you move forward with it? So the top design is what was presented during the preliminary development review. And on there you can see there's some rock facade on there. There is a covered, porch on that entry with some exposed truss work, some variations in the paint. But then the aesthetics that were submitted with the use permit modification of the bottom version, where a lot of those, accents have been stripped away from the building. And so in the staff report was discussion about staff doesn't feel that this bottom design meets the thresholds of the gateway design aesthetics. The top design is more appropriate. And so we'll come back to this, but I didn't want to bring it up just so you can look at it now. So the second use that's part of this application is the RV park land use. And that's going to be located on the northern half of the property, kind of wedged between the parking facilities. Right now, it's currently occupied with FEMA trailers, post-fire FEMA trailers. The Moose Lodge staff had gone through our on-site wastewater division previously and received approval for 13 of the 15 spaces shown here, as well as already did the upgrades for the septic to accommodate 13 RVs. On this site plan that you're looking at, this is the site plan that will go to the state for their request for approval for this RV park. And on it is 15 spaces. So the conditions are couched in such a way, the conditions of approval are couched in a way that right now, there's only approval for 13 RVs. We can get to 15 as the threshold, but it's going to require some more review and upgrade for the septic. Give them the opportunity without having to come back, because everybody else can accommodate the full 15. So, as part of this RV park review, an additional on-site hydrant would be needed. When we did the preliminary review last year, it was just about the lodge. At that time, the comments back from staff back to the applicant were about this park needing to be permitted as part of the formal use permit application. So now that this is part of the formal project, that review now necessitates another on-site hydrant so that the distance from that hydrant to the furthest RV is within the required distance. For the RV park land use, 23 parking spaces are required and they're shown. If this is approved, so there's two steps to this. First is going to be just acknowledging it in the use permit about the RV park. The applicants then will need to work with the State Department of Housing and Community Development to actually get the permit to operate an RV park. When that happens, all of the future development permits for this area, for things that serve the RVs, will all go through the state. So if one of those power pedestals fails, they'll go to the state to get the electrical. Those upgrades for the septic, we review the tentative plans, but the state will issue the permits, and the state will do the inspection, right? Plumbing failures. They have almost like a little snack shack. They're approved to sell no open food or drink. The county calls it a bottle bar, where you can just sell the closed drink. So anything related to that, because its purpose is to serve the RVs, it all will go through the state. But they won't permit it until they have zoning verification that it's okay with the local jurisdiction. Okay. So the next steps for this process. We're at this first one here, use permit, and that's to get this use permit modified to allow them to rebuild this larger and expanded land use, right? Larger lodge, and this will be a great asset to this town, and it's actually really encouraging that all three of the fraternal organizations are in construction. Right? The Moose are here getting their amendments. The Eagles and the Elks have already been issued. So that's really encouraging. So once we get this use permit approved, there'll be that 7-day appeal period. After that, the Moose Lodge will need to submit a new HCD Form 514. We fill these out for all mobile home parks or RV parks, where we have sign-offs from the various town departments. We list how many units it's authorized for. That will get submitted back to HCD with a copy of the fully executed use permit, so that they know they can continue to process the application. Next would be septic. To apply for and secure the actual septic construction permit for the lodge, because that will require some new tanks, new lines, and it's all shown on the prelim plan, but that would be next. And then, of course, if they wanted at that time to go through the additional review and get the preliminary plans reviewed for the upgrade for those additional 2 RVs, we could do it then too. For the building permit, that would come after septic. So then it's submitting for the building plans, plus all those engineered civil improvements, right? The parking, the drainage, the erosion, the water system plans to PID, the hydrant plans for fire and PID, and then the health department plans. Because there's a kitchen in this facility, Butte County Environmental Health, right? We don't issue until they tell us that they've given preliminary approval for the building plans, and then we'll hold final for them too. And then the final inspections. So that's where we'll make sure, before we issue the certificate of occupancy, that all the site improvements are done with engineering, septic's all done, PID signed off, the hydrant's up and running, environmental health signed off all the food facility, and then the landscaping. We're just asking for verification, right, that 10% of the landscaping on that site still exists. If not, then that's the minimum that they'll need to meet through a landscape plan. Right. It's that understanding that a lot of these facilities already had this stuff in place, so if it's salvageable, we're more than happy to accept it, right? But if not, that's the minimum threshold is 10%. So the analysis conclusion for this project, for environmental review, it is part of a class of projects that is deemed categorically exempt because it's a rebuild of an existing structure of substantially the same use and the same purpose, right? Reviewing agencies supported the project as proposed and have the capacity to serve with the conditions proposed. Staff does recommend Planning Commission approval of modified use permit number PL 21-00065 and the 19 conditions of approval, authorizing the rebuild and expansion of the Moose Lodge and associated RV park. And then the required findings for approval are in your staff report. If the use permit modification is approved, staff does request additional Planning Commission direction while we're here at this setting and input on those proposed building facades. We can go back to them and talk about it. This is a discretionary entitlement. This is part of Commission's involvement, is what you would like to see on that final approval for the facade of that building. So if you have any questions for staff, I'm happy to answer those, as well as our building official, Fire Marshal Tony Lindsay, is here as well. If you have any questions about the fire portion, or access or the building itself, we can answer those before we open up to public.
Yeah, I had a couple of questions.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, the first one, you mentioned that there was a fire storage facility. Are they still planning on putting a storage facility above and beyond Moose Lodge itself? Or are they
It
going
is not shown, actually. Tina, can you do me a favor? Can you minimize this and bring up the big site plan? It's not shown on the site plan as proposed right now, though as an accessory use, let's say they come back and want to do that at a later time. We just see that as accessory to the main structure, just like if they wanted to rebuild a gazebo or something. We don't have to come back to commission again. That's not the land use. It's just...
Well, I was just wondering what the size of that was.
Oh, gotcha. The one that was before? 616 square feet from
So we can-
1982.
In our minds, we can deduct that from the 2,000 square feet. That makes it bigger, so it's only about 1,300 square feet bigger than the original one because they're not doing it. I'm just,
Oh,
thinking.
yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so, all right. Second question I had, you guys know me, I'm concerned with how it looks when somebody comes into this town, because we know that success builds success.
Yes.
For this to be successful, and to make other building activities successful, I strongly support what the staff is saying about the facade.
Okay.
When we went after the fire and they did that survey of what people wanted here in town and all that, one of the things that came out loud and clear was the idea of a mountain craftsman look for some of these buildings, especially along that main thoroughfare Skyway.
Right.
And as I saw the first picture, I was getting excited because that matches the mountain craftsman look. But I saw the second one and it was very, very plain. And I'd have a hard time approving something that's that plain, that's in the gateway design area.
Right.
So, for me, I would like to say that that would be a condition, that they have to meet those standards, and the mountain craftsman concept is what we're pushing here, which they had in their preliminary design.
Yes, I think it was showing the commission that, even preliminarily, this was a design that they were looking at that would appear on the face of it to really meet
Yeah.
those aesthetic, standards for that area. It would complement really nicely the other buildings as you come in on the Skyway. When you look at those, they also have that, they have like a stone bottom, as well as, a covered entry that is part of the theme also.
Is it permanent residence?
That will be through HCD. We don't have any control over how long the occupancy on it, but potentially.
I would hope they'd have all 13 or 15 filled to help them with their income. I mean, that's a good idea. I think that's great, and there's a need. So, I'm all in favor of that part of the build. I have a hang up on the aesthetics.
Yes.
I admit that.
One thing that we certainly learned post-fire, staff was not aware that RV parks tied to fraternal organizations were under the auspices of HCD. But they came by post-fire and had a meeting about where their jurisdiction lies. And they've also been in contact with, the Moose Lodge, plus they'd reached out to the Elks Lodge. They also had RV spaces. To kind of help rope all that in and make sure that everybody's working under the standards that they should be, so.
I am wondering, since we're on that topic of the look, I was curious if there was any mention of some kind of fencing for privacy for the RV area.
Not on that. It would not be something that we would have the authority to condition.
Got it.
HCD.
What I thought.
So there's nothing about the aesthetics as it pertains to the RVs or the utilities or the space. Yeah.
It's all ACD's authority.
Commissioner Reynolds, do you have any questions?
Just a comment that I do like the preliminary design. I think it's much more attractive and better to look at from Skyway. So I would definitely agree with Ron's comments of that design. It's much more aesthetically pleasing.
And I'd like to go on record as saying that I really appreciate the covered entry. Hopefully someday have normal paradise rains, and that will be a welcome addition. So I would like to see that continue.
Would I be correct in saying that if a design review application came in showing the top design, that council or commission would be pleased if that was approved?
Yes.
Yeah, and I'd like to go
Okay.
further, saying that if the bottom one is the one they go with, I'd have a hard time
Correct.
going with it, voting for it.
Oh, correct.
I love the fact they're coming back. I like the fact that they have an RV, and I'm hoping they stay full, and I hope that the moose, fraternity grows and all that's fantastic for the town. It's just great. Just the impact of that facade on as we come into town, because my long-range goal is I want to make Paradise a destination where people
Yes.
say, let's go up to Paradise for lunch. It's such a cute little town.
Yes.
This will add to that, quote, cuteness. And I'm afraid the other one down below looks more like a a brown barn, and it's just me.
And also the understanding that post-fire, the visibility of that site from Skyway is so much more pronounced.
Absolutely. The trees are gone.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
All these buildings are setting the standard.
Yes, exactly right.
That we've had a say, I am going to open the public hearing. And do we have the applicant that wants to speak?
You can keep your mask off when you're by the mic if you feel comfortable with that, because it'll help people who are listening in on the video, because the mask just muffles your voice up fierce. And stay as close to the mic as you feel comfortable.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
My name is Cy Morris. I'm the administrator for the Paradise Moose Lodge. And one of the things that you guys addressed was how the RV park would look. We actually paid a landscaper, architect, and it will actually be enclosed with hedging that goes around it. So it will be actually hidden. Even the people sitting outside will not be able. So it'll be contained within that. And really, the first design was the one that we liked anyway. So you voted for the right one. But thank you very much. I appreciate. I just felt like I had to come up and clarify that yes, that RV area will be nicely landscaped around it.
That's great news.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you
Yeah,
for passing that
sure
along.
the residents will appreciate that.
Do we have anyone else here that would like to speak on this item? And do we have any communication
We
with
have
this
no
item?
cards, no cards on.
Okay, then I'm going to close the public hearing and bring it back to commission. Any more discussion? Or are we-
Do we need to make a motion on this gateway standards, or input from the commission is good enough?
No, input from the commission is good enough. So we'll be able to, there's a condition on there already,
Yes, there is.
right, to submit for design review and to meet that standard. Just a reminder, it also is applied to the garbage enclosure, right? We want that to complement the building. As well as there's a monument sign proposed out there, so depending on how that looks, usually it means some kind of facade along the bottom. So they'll all be subject to that.
So what we're looking for now is a motion to adopt the required findings for approval as provided by staff and approve the Moose Lodge modified use permit application.
I'd like to move that we approve it with the understanding that they'll apply the gateway standards as we discussed. But also I'd like to applaud Moose Lodge for a very good package that they've submitted to us.
I'll second.
Roll call vote. Costa,
Aye.
Bard,
Aye.
Bond,
Aye.
Commissioner Reynolds,
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. And then, as mentioned in the presentation, there's a 7-day appeal period during which we cannot issue any permits pertaining to this project. But after we're done, then, Cy, you'll get a fully executed copy of the use permit, and we'll get you an updated Form 514 for HCD. Okay?
Working through Rolls, Anderson and
Oh,
Rolls.
yes.
Civil engineer, they're working with the state already to get the park state registry. So it will be in compliance with the state as well as hopefully the town.
You're right.
Yeah.
I touched base with Lauren over
Right,
there. Yep.
What I've been talking to is Keith. But,
Oh, yes. Okay.
Super.
so thank you.
We have other business?
I don't have any projects at the moment that have to come back to commission, so it's passable. We'll skip on July. We're doing the environmental, the initial study for the environmental on the distillery right now, but once we're done with that and we have concurrence from the applicant, that's when we're going to route it through the state for review. So that's still a little ways off. We have been in talks with some out-of-the-area developers interested in doing affordable multifamily housing, which is fantastic. Looking at some different projects or areas in town, and some of those will require revised environmental review based on some previous proposals that never went through on those properties. Anything like that, we'd bring to the commission for review, but right now it's just discussion, but very hopeful discussion. Yeah.
So, what's going on with grocery outlets? I haven't seen any work done on
Oh,
that.
I know.
I know, I saw signs.
Yeah, they did do that. They're using a Chico sign company to, put new signage on the front, swap out the monument. Their building permits are ready to issue whenever they are. So they've got interior remodel plans ready to go.
Are we still looking for fall, or does it look like it's?
You know what it
pushed out a
sounds
bit?
like is that, so the folks who bought the property are more like property managers. So their business is to get it prepped for use, but they won't actually run the business. So they're still interviewing like other franchisees who might want to run the Paradise one. Mayor Crowder, I guess, had spoken to one of the candidates and stuff. So they're still trying to find who's going to actually run it. So I could believe they don't want to pull the trigger yet.
Right.
Until they have somebody in place ready to go. But,
On a more critical note,
yes.
happening to Dalio and the other donut shop.
Yeah, right?
Haven't heard anything.
No, the one that's going in the DMV shopping center,
Huh?
their building plans came in and went out for correction. So they're taking care of that right now. But you're right, I haven't heard anything recently on Dalio's. May go back and check.
Getting nervous.
And then I know we talked a while back, there was a brewery. I have to separate that from the distillery. We had a brewery that wants to go in the downtown. Been trying to negotiate for land, but the difficulty is, and we see this town-wide, there are some landowners who do not want to relinquish the properties into the PG&E settlement, right? So the lots they were looking at, one owner's interested, the other wants to wait. So now they're trying to find some other spots, but
Contiguous.
yeah. But they've moved to town in the meantime. Like, they're committed to be here. So we're doing everything we can to help them find some pieces to cobble together.